Every street got stories. We tell them all. Street lit Chronicles.
Tyree Jackson woke up gasping. His chest heaved violently as sweat soaked the collar of his t-shirt. For a few seconds, he just sat there in darkness, trying to catch his breath while his heart slammed against his ribs. Again. That dream again. He rubbed both hands over his face and looked around his bedroom. Floor-to-ceiling windows, soft city lights glowing beyond the glass, modern furniture. Quiet, safe. Nothing like the dream. Still, his pulse refused to calm down. In the dream, he had been someone else. Not attorney Tyree Jackson living in downtown Chicago. Not the polished rising star at Whitmore and Klein. Not the man about to make junior partner before turning 35. No. In the dream, he was poor, exhausted, living in South Dallas in a cramped duplex with peeling paint and bad plumbing. He worked construction. His back hurt constantly. His hands were rough. And every morning he climbed dangerous ladders beneath the burning Texas heat. The dream always felt too real, too detailed. He could smell the asphalt, feel the sweat running down his neck, hear men yelling over nail guns and machinery, and every single time, the dream ended the same way. Falling. Tyree squeezed his eyes shut. He could still feel it, the terrifying shift beneath his feet, the moment the ladder tilted, that horrible weightless sensation before impact. Then darkness. Every time he woke from it, it took him a while to remember who he really was, who he was supposed to be. A successful attorney, a man with a future, not some struggling construction worker in Texas. Tyree got out of bed and walked barefoot into his kitchen overlooking Lake Michigan. Chicago glittered beautifully at night. He poured himself water slowly, still shaken. "Get a grip," he muttered. But part of him couldn't shake the strange grief that dreams left behind, because the man in those dreams felt real. Too real. Sometimes Tyree even remembered the construction worker's mother, a warm older woman named Loretta. Sometimes he remembered the tiny duplex so clearly he could practically walk through it in his mind. And the weirdest part, the emotions lingered after he woke. Loneliness, stress, fear. Like somewhere out there another version of him actually existed. Tyree shook the thought away. He blamed stress. The upcoming partner decision at the firm had everyone on edge, especially him. He barely slept anymore. The next morning, downtown Chicago buzzed with movement while Tyree walked toward the courthouse carrying coffee and legal briefs. People moved around him quickly. Expensive coats, taxi horns, steam rising from sewer grates. His phone buzzed nonstop with work emails. Normal, everything normal. Until he saw her. She stood near the courthouse steps, fighting with an umbrella that had turned inside out from the wind. Beautiful, dark curls, brown skin glowing against the gray morning, sharp, intelligent eyes. And somehow, Tyree stopped walking entirely. Something hit him square in the chest. Not attraction, recognition, like he knew her. The woman glanced up and caught him staring. "You planning to help or just watch me lose this fight?" Tyree blinked out of his trance. "Sorry." He stepped forward quickly and fixed the umbrella. "Chicago weather got hands," he joked. She laughed, and the sound hit him like music he'd forgotten existed. "Thank you," she said. Tyree handed the umbrella back carefully. For a moment, neither moved. Then suddenly, flash, a horrifying image exploded through Tyree's mind. A ladder, falling backward. Pain. He stumbled slightly. The woman frowned instantly. "You okay?" Tyree grabbed the side railing. Yeah. But he wasn't, because for one split second, the dream had felt more real than the street beneath his feet. "You sure?" Tyree looked back at her. And strangely, the panic eased. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I'm good now." She smiled softly. "Rayna." His chest tightened immediately. "Rayna," he repeated. The name felt important somehow, like hearing the final note of a song he almost remembered. "I'm Tyree." "Well, Tyree, thanks for saving my umbrella," he grinned. "Can I save you dinner too?" Rayna laughed instantly. "That was smooth." "So that's a yes?" "That's a maybe." Then she walked away smiling while Tyree stood frozen on the sidewalk, watching her disappear into the crowd. And for reasons he couldn't explain, it felt like the most important moment of his life. Over the next several months, Tyree pursued Rayna relentlessly. Not aggressively, patiently, intentionally. She challenged him immediately. Rayna was an architect who loved old buildings, jazz music, bookstores, and late-night conversations about purpose and faith. She didn't care about his money, didn't care about his title. In fact, the first time he mentioned making partner, she shrugged and said, "Okay, but are you happy?" The question bothered him for days. Because he didn't know. Successful? Yes. Respected? Definitely. Happy? Tyree wasn't sure, especially because the dreams continued. Sometimes they were small flashes, sweaty construction gloves, Texas heat, the smell of sawdust. Other nights were worse. He'd dream entire days in South Dallas, conversations, bills piled on counters, a tired woman calling him baby from another room. And always, eventually, the ladder, the fall, the darkness. Tyree started seeing a therapist because of it. "You believe dreams mean something?" the therapist asked. Tyree hesitated. "I think maybe they come from somewhere." "Like what?" He looked uncomfortable answering. "Another life." The therapist smiled politely in the way people do when they think you sound crazy. But Tyree wasn't joking. Sometimes he woke up genuinely confused about which life was real, especially after meeting Rayna. Because somehow, she existed in both the feeling and the emptiness, like she was the missing piece in either world. One night, Rayna found him sitting awake in darkness. They'd been dating nearly 2 years by then. She walked into the living room wearing one of his t-shirts. "You had the dream again?" Tyree looked up slowly. "How you know?" "Because you get quiet after." She sat beside him and rested against his shoulder. "You want to tell me about it?" Tyree stared ahead. "In the dream, I'm not me." "You are you," Rayna whispered. "No, I mean I'm somebody completely different." He explained everything. Dallas, construction work, his mother, the ladder. Rayna listened carefully without interrupting once. Most people would have laughed. She didn't. When he finished, she rubbed his hand gently. "Maybe it's your soul trying to show you something." Tyree looked at her. "You really believe that?" "I believe some connections are bigger than logic." Then she smiled softly. "Maybe in every universe you find me." That line stayed with him forever. Years passed. Tyree made partner. Rayna moved in. They built a life together slowly and beautifully. Sunday brunches, road trips, arguments about paint colors, lazy mornings, dance nights in the kitchen, real love, the kind Tyree once believed only happened to other people. And through it all, the dreams continued. But they changed. The closer he got to Rayna, the more the dreams felt like warnings instead of random nightmares. Sometimes he'd wake up crying without understanding why. Sometimes he'd stare at ladders on construction sites and feel physically sick. And sometimes he'd hear a woman's voice calling his name from far away, a voice that sounded heartbreakingly familiar. The wedding arrived 5 years after they met. Tyree stood at the altar barely holding himself together emotionally, because somehow, despite the beautiful church, despite the guests, despite the music, he felt terrified, like something was ending. Rayna appeared at the back of the church in her gown, and every fear disappeared instantly. She was breathtaking. When she finally reached him, Tyree took her trembling hand. Then Rayna leaned close, smiling through tears. "Baby." "What?" "I'm pregnant." Tyree's entire face collapsed emotionally. "What?" She laughed softly. "I found out this morning." Tears flooded his eyes immediately. He pressed his forehead against hers. "Oh my God." The preacher smiled warmly. "Shall we begin?" The ceremony started. Vows exchanged, promises spoken. Tyree couldn't stop crying. Not because he was sad, because for the first time in his existence, he felt complete. Then came the final moment. The preacher raised his hands. "By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you." The lights flickered. Tyree frowned. The room distorted slightly. Guests blurred strangely. His stomach dropped instantly. No, not now, not now. Rayna squeezed his hand. Tyree? The church began dissolving around them like paint washing away in water. Panic exploded inside him. Rayna! People vanished one by one. Music slowed unnaturally. Darkness spread through the room. Tyree grabbed Rayna desperately. No, 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 please! Tears rolled down her cheeks too now, and suddenly he understood. The dreams, Dallas, the ladder, all of it. This was the dream. Not the other life. This one. Rayna, he whispered brokenly. She held his face gently, and even while the world disappeared around them, she smiled. I think we always find each other. Then she vanished, and Tyree screamed. Tyree's eyes flew open violently. Bright hospital lights, machines, pain, confusion. A woman gasped nearby. Loretta dropped her knitting needles instantly. Tyree! He stared at her blankly, older, tired, real. Oh, thank you, Jesus, she cried. Tyree's breathing became ragged. Hospital room. Dallas, the ladder. No, 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 no. How long? He whispered. Loretta grabbed his hand, sobbing. 3 days, baby. You've been unconscious 3 days. Tyree's face shattered. 3 days. But he had lived 5 years. 5 years loving Rayna. 5 years building a life. 5 years becoming someone else. His chest caved inward with grief so violent it physically hurt. And when the tears finally came, they came for a woman who technically never existed. A wife, a child, a future. Gone in the blink of an eye, yet somehow more real than anything he'd ever known. The next 3 days in the hospital felt longer than the 5 years Tyree had lived in Chicago. At least in that life he had Rayna. Here, everything felt cold, empty, muted. Tyree barely spoke after waking up. He answered doctors with one-word responses, ate only enough to keep Loretta from worrying too much. Mostly he just stared out the hospital window while machines beeped quietly beside him. Loretta stayed there every single day, knitting, praying, watching her son grieve something she couldn't understand. At first she thought the head injury had him confused, but this felt deeper than confusion. This looked like mourning, real mourning, the kind people carried after funerals. On the second night, she woke up to hear him crying softly. Not loud, not dramatic, just broken. Loretta sat up immediately. Tyree? He quickly wiped his face. I'm good. No, you're not. He looked away. I'm trying. Loretta moved her chair closer to the bed. You want to tell me what's hurting you? Tyree stayed silent for a long time. Then finally, she was pregnant. Loretta frowned softly. What woman? Tyree swallowed hard, and slowly, he told her everything. The law firm, Chicago, the dreams, meeting Rayna, falling in love, the proposal, the wedding, the baby, 5 entire years. Loretta listened without interrupting once. At first her expression held concern, then confusion, then heartbreak. Because whether she believed the story or not, her son clearly did, and the pain in his voice was too real to fake. When he finished speaking, tears slid silently down his face. I know it sounds crazy. Loretta grabbed his hand immediately. Baby, I don't care how it sounds. Tyree looked down. It felt real, Ma. I know. No. I mean real. His breathing shook. I remember everything. The way she laughed, the way she smelled. I remember what she liked on her burgers. I remember what side of the bed she slept on. Loretta's eyes watered. I lost a whole life. Those words nearly broke her. She rubbed his hand gently. Maybe God was trying to show you something. Tyree laughed bitterly. Like what? What kind of lesson is that? Loretta thought carefully before answering. Maybe to let you know your life could be bigger than what you settled for. Tyree stared at her. You always had greatness in you, Tyree. Maybe now you finally believe it. He looked away again. But why let me fall in love? Loretta had no answer for that. So instead she stood and kissed his forehead, and for the first time since he woke up, Tyree leaned into somebody's comfort. A week later, Tyree sat nervously inside a medical office waiting room for his follow-up appointment. The television mounted in the corner played daytime talk shows while nurses moved back and forth through the halls. Tyree looked healthier physically, but emotionally, still wrecked. Sleep barely came anymore. Every dream now ended with Rayna disappearing in his arms. Tyree Jackson, he looked up and froze. The nurse standing in the doorway looked exactly like Rayna. Not similar, not close, exactly. Same eyes, same smile, same voice. Tyree stood so fast the clipboard fell from his lap. Rayna? The woman blinked. Excuse me? Tyree stared at her like he'd seen a ghost. His chest tightened painfully. Rayna. Now she looked confused. I think you got the wrong person. Tyree's face fell instantly. I'm sorry. The woman gave a polite but cautious smile. My name's Deja. Tyree couldn't stop staring. Even the way she tilted her head was the same. Embarrassment flooded him suddenly. I'm sorry, he repeated quietly. You look like somebody I used to know. Something softened in Deja's expression then. Well, hopefully they were nice to you. Tyree forced a small smile. Yeah, he whispered. She was. After the appointment, Tyree sat in his car gripping the steering wheel for nearly 20 minutes. His emotions twisted together painfully. Hope, confusion, grief, embarrassment. Because for one impossible second, he thought he got her back. And losing her twice somehow hurt even worse. Months passed, and slowly. Tyree changed. He never returned to construction. The moment he looked at another ladder, his stomach turned violently. Instead, he used part of his settlement money from the accident to study for his real estate license. Oddly enough, learning contracts and negotiations came naturally to him. Almost too naturally. Like somewhere deep inside him. Attorney Tyree still existed. Within a year, he became an agent at one of Dallas's fastest-growing real estate agencies, and surprisingly, he was good, really good. Clients trusted him instantly. Tyree had a calm confidence now he never carried before the accident. He dressed sharper, spoke differently, carried himself differently. People noticed. By the second year, he had already upgraded from his tiny duplex into a luxury apartment downtown. Not millionaire rich, but comfortable, successful, respected. Loretta noticed the difference too. You walk different now, she told him one evening. Tyree smirked slightly. What'd that mean? Like you finally see yourself. And maybe she was right. Still, some nights he sat alone replaying memories of Rayna. Wondering if she existed somewhere, wondering if he had imagined all of it. Until one Tuesday morning changed everything. Tyree decided to walk to work that morning since the weather was unusually nice. Downtown Dallas buzzed with movement while sunlight reflected off glass buildings overhead. Halfway to the office, he stopped at a coffee shop he'd been meaning to try. The line stretched nearly to the door. Tyree checked emails on his phone while waiting. Then he heard it. A laugh, soft, warm, familiar. His entire body went still. No way. Slowly, Tyree turned around. And there she was. Deja, standing behind him holding her phone while laughing at something somebody said. Tyree's heart started pounding instantly. It wasn't just her face, it was her energy. Her mannerisms, the way her smile lit up her whole expression. For a second he forgot how to breathe. He quickly turned back around before she noticed him staring. His thoughts raced violently. This can't be real. The clerk called out impatiently. Sir? Tyree blinked. Huh? Your order. Oh, medium coffee, 2 sugars. He stepped aside, waiting for his drink while trying not to look back. Then, Deja walked to the register. Large caramel latte, she said. Tyree closed his eyes briefly. His pulse hammered harder. And suddenly, Rayna's words echoed through his mind. Maybe in every universe you find me. Then another memory followed. I think we always find each other. Tyree opened his eyes immediately. No, he wasn't losing her again. This time, he had to try. As soon as Deja stepped to the side, Tyree finally spoke. So, this officially makes twice. Deja looked up from her phone, then recognition spread across her face. Well, if it isn't the guy who thought I was somebody else. Tyree laughed nervously. Yeah, that was probably a terrible first impression. A little, she teased, but in my defense, you look exactly like her. The words slipped out before he could stop them. For a brief second, something softened in Deja's expression. She must have been somebody important. Tyree looked at her quietly. Yeah, he admitted. She was. Something about the honesty in his voice made Deja study him differently now, less guarded, less amused. The clerk called their drinks. Tyree grabbed his coffee while Deja picked up hers. Neither walked away. Instead, they drifted naturally toward the door together, still talking. And somehow the conversation felt easy immediately, like they'd paused it somewhere before and were finally continuing it. Outside, the morning sun warmed the sidewalk while people hurried past them. Deja pointed toward her cup. This place has the best caramel lattes in Dallas. Tyree smiled. So this your regular spot? Every single morning. Damn, so if I come here tomorrow around this same time? Deja smirked knowingly. There's a pretty good chance you'll see me. Tyree grinned, and for the first time since waking up in that hospital bed. Hope didn't hurt anymore. The next morning he returned to the coffee shop, no Deja. Still, he ordered coffee anyway. The second morning, she appeared. Tyree secretly paid for her drink before she reached the register. Deja looked shocked. You ain't have to do that. I know. They talked for 15 minutes. The next day became 20, then 30, then an hour sitting outside together before work. Every day Tyree asked her to dinner. Every day she smiled and answered, maybe. Until finally, on the fifth day, Tyree asked again while handing her coffee. Deja shook her head laughing. You are persistent. I'm committed. To what? Tyree looked at her carefully. Finding out if you're worth all this effort. Deja smiled softly. Then finally, yes. Tyree blinked. Yes? Yes, Tyree. He grinned instantly. Like, real yes? Boy, don't make me change my mind. They exchanged numbers, and for the rest of the day Tyree couldn't focus on work at all. Because for the first time since the accident, hope returned. Their first date lasted 6 hours, then came another, and strangely, being with Deja didn't feel like replacing Rayna. It felt like continuing something unfinished. There were differences. Deja was more sarcastic, more guarded, less dreamy than Rayna. But certain things remained identical. Her laugh, her smile, the way she touched his arm when she laughed too hard. Sometimes Tyree caught himself staring at her emotionally. One night, Deja finally asked, Why you look at me like that sometimes? Tyree hesitated, then answered honestly, Because I think I've been looking for you my whole life. Deja stared at him quietly, then softly replied, Well, maybe I've been looking for you too. 3 years later, Tyree stood in another church, another tuxedo, another wedding. But this time he was terrified, not because he feared losing her, because he remembered what happened last time. As Deja walked toward him in her dress, Tyree's eyes filled immediately, and when she finally reached him, she smiled knowingly. What? She whispered. Tyree shook his head emotionally. Nothing. But deep inside, he was waiting for the world to disappear again, waiting for lights to flicker, waiting to wake up. It never happened. The preacher smiled warmly. By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Nothing faded, nothing vanished, only applause filled the church. And when Tyree kissed Deja, he realized something beautiful. Maybe Rayna had never been a dream. Maybe she had been a glimpse, a second chance, a bridge leading him toward the life he was always meant to find. And years later, when Tyree and Deja welcomed their first daughter into the world, Deja looked down at the baby and smiled. What should we name her? Tyree stared at his daughter for a long moment. Then tears filled his eyes softly. Rayna.